Thanks, everyone. Welcome, please, again to Lux Lighting and our live stream series. And today's topic on lighting diverse casts. We're super excited with this one. This has been requested a lot, and we've got a really great lineup of folks here to go into a nice, good discussion about this. I just want to introduce everyone. We have Gaffer Kiva Knight, representing the Bay Area. Gaffers Justin Dickson. We have DP Tommy Maddox with his boycott style shirt on, and James Laxton coming in from the UK, and the one and only Matty Libatique, wearing and myself, Mike Bauman, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for participating in this today. We've got a lot to talk about. There's a lot of great discussions and as we've been talking before this, there's been a lot of really interesting aspects. I just wanted to start with this quote from Mike Coulter, an actor, just talking about lighting and representation and things like that, and how, lighting people of color and what that is, and how the lack of representation there is in that space. And I know, James, you and I were talking a bit about this the other day. And I was going through like the history of kind of what, trying to find actors and examples of like how lighting was happening back in the earlier days. I was looking at the work that was done with like City Poitier and things like that. And like, how the kind of photography at that time was very much about like hard light, and very much about, just pushing a lot of light on the face. And we've got a lot of examples of this, of like, and how it's very interesting to see how like kind of lighting has evolved in handling these situations. And, a lot of situations where it's just not afraid of a hard light. And I think, I guess I put it to the group. I mean, kind of like, what do you guys have seen as some of the changes in your approach on, and the development of lighting folks of color?
Mike, people are still doing it. That's why I sent you that picture, man. You should put that picture up.
I know.
people are still doing that, man. Like it's 1960 something, when the technology has definitely come a lot further.
Yeah.
I would love to get Maddie's reaction to that fucking picture. It's
which picture is it?
Bob and Keith.
Which photo?
Well, we're oh yeah, I guess. Do you see the presentation?
Yeah, I see it. Oh, the Poitier picture?
Yeah, exactly. And just like the use of hard light.
But it was all hard light. When you look at films like everything made in the late 60s and the 70s, hard light was, especially in the US, hard light was the way people were lighting scenes, and not just with dark skin tones, but white skin tones. You can see it on the cop on the right side of frame. And then, they're talking about, I remember meeting Owen Roisman back in the day, and he said that he shot 3 Days of the Condor with a high-speed stock that was 160 ASA. I mean, that's crazy,
Yeah.
And then as we transitioned, when you and I were at AFI, it was, we had the benefit of 500 ISO. 5296 was the first 500 speed stock.
Yeah.
So but we still came up as there was a hangover from hard light when we were in school in like the early 90s. And, at the same time, Kinoflow came out, and they came out with a light that was soft, and we didn't know what to do with it. People were pitching it as a fill light. Like, who fills anymore? And, you know what I mean? That's one evolution right there. Like, to call something a fill light. like who the hell brings out fill? Like, we got to bring in some fill. Now we say passive or or push. It's like I think that we've evolved because of the first because of the emulsion being faster, and then we evolved to soft light because all the the Nikvis and the Toninos and like all the soft light that started to influence us. We were able to do now because our stock was faster, and we didn't have the fear of underexposure. And now the digital sensors allow us to even be softer. You know, we ran into a problem on Birds of Prey where we had a really dark skin tone. We just couldn't bring the man out of the scene. And we ended up going, and this is it here.
Yeah. This is one of them.
And it was probably the only time where we used hard light in the film, because we just had to go back, reach back in pocket to find some old technique to make it work. And all of a sudden, like, flags were coming in. You know, how many, 18 by 24s and 4 by 4s and toppers, bottomers.
Matty, I found these images from when we did Tigerland, which was like 20 years ago. And
that's called that dude. Tell him what this man told you.
Yeah, we day one, or not day one, but our first day with him, he walks in, he's like, we're kind of like, wow, this guy's dark. And he's like, what'd he say? I need a black man's 8. He was like, yeah, throw some light on me. He had the dialogue because he was so used to being in situations where people were, it goes back to that quote at the beginning where like people were like, oh man, you got to throw a lot of light on this guy. And, and of course on that, I think we were shooting 16 on that. And I think we were doing a cross process on it also. So it was like, there was a lot
of, it was 72-48, push 2 stops.
Yeah, intense. But the fact is that the actor already, he came in preconditioned to the fact that, I've got to tell these guys to put a lot of light on me. And which is a huge statement. It's just as far as like where things are at, or this is 20 years ago, but yeah.
But that's the thing about it though, Matty. Matty said it. Matty's evolved. I mean, that's why Matty's work has influenced so many of us. And, is that you got to evolve with the technology. And that's why I was bringing up that picture I just sent you, Mike, because some guys haven't evolved with the technology of it all, and they're still shooting like it is 1960. And we've seen it. That's like, we have evidence of people still lighting black folks with hard light, like white hard light, like straight tungsten hard light, you don't need to do in like 2020. It's like I know Sidney Poitier. Me and Justin used to shoot Sidney Poitier, and it's like we didn't even use hard light on him when we did these interviews with him years ago. It's like you got to evolve with the technology and what's available. I almost think it's like offensive when I see black people like hit with hard light, smack in the face, straight tungsten, 650 because you got to bring them out, and it's like, no, that's not necessarily the case. And the technology lets you reach the bottom end of that curve,
definitely,
in order to mix, change things, and it's like, and to be bold and to take chances. Really, there's people that I watch stuff on TV and I'll get going with some of my friends, and I'm like, how the hell is it that people are still front lighting black folks? And it's like, it's 2020. And it's not like an aesthetic choice, and it's not that they're shooting like E&R process, or like they're shooting cross process or anything that needs additional light because the curve is so hard. They just haven't evolved in their thinking about approaching black women. I think it's a level of like, there's a bit of culture behind it. Like, oh, you need more light. It's like, no, not necessarily. I mean, Gordon Parks was shooting black people with soft light back in the 50s, with near a window, shadow edging them out. Or Roy de Carrava was doing the same thing back in the 50s and 40s with, 50 speed film. But it's like, it's just a level of like social sensitivity as well as evolving with the time and technology. And that's what makes, people like James and fucking Matty and yourself and Vic's like, me and Justin, we study this stuff all the time for fun. But also culturally, it's different for me. I'm a black man. So my relatives, when I see them in the living room in North Carolina, in my grandma, my big mom's house when she was alive in Seal, Alabama, like looking at the light and responding to the way the rooms were and all that stuff, like that stuff started a long time for me unconsciously. But I mean, I didn't need to always have a light on to see my grandmother, who was a dark-skinned black woman in Alabama. You know what I mean? Like, to think the technology has evolved to that point. My wife's a brown-skinned woman. I got to take tons of pictures of her. I don't need to have a spotlight follow me around, an Obi light over the camera to take her photograph. I mean, it's fucking crazy. It's a level of like cultural sensitivity and like really getting beyond what things were, So it's just one of them things, man. I just think people need to evolve a bit.
Yeah. I also just say too, like, I think we're talking about the stocks becoming more sensitive and things like that. Another sort of camera on the camera side of the fence. technology, something important about the last sort of 10, sort of 12 years or so is the idea of video basically becoming what movies, television is made from. And now everyone can see that monitor, including the cast, including the director, including the writers. And I think in some respects, we talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that till we go blue in the face slightly. But I think one advantage of that is you as a cast member, you can see your skin tone represented right there. If you have a black director that may not be so savvy in terms of how to light or be a cinematographer or our part of the job, all of a sudden the access to the image becomes available to them. And we can all sort of have an open dialogue about how to have representation and how to light and what color of skin tone should this be and things like that. I think that's a pretty important aspect of it all as well. Inclusivity of the idea of sharing what we do for a living and our art form with the people around us as we all sort of make the same project together.
Yeah. Well, I remember speaking a bit to what you were saying, Tommy, just, how people, obviously when they're just hitting somebody with that light, there's so much great things happening in skin tones to begin with that just kind of gets obliterated. I know, Kiva, when we were talking the other day, you had mentioned just like, reflectivity, these kind of qualities, things that are really great characteristics that you want to emphasize that help the character, help the actor. And, and some of the, we were talking a bit about just kind of how you and James were playing with like a lot of mixed color temperatures and things like this and that kind of thing.
Mm.
Yeah, I think just to chime in, I think the term painting with light is no better emphasized than on someone with a darker skin tone. There's just detail, reflectivity, colors that show up that just don't show up on lighter skin. It's just a fact. I think there's another image of Chiron on the beach, Ashton Sanders on the beach, and it's like there's a sodium vapor light that's probably 400 feet away that's picking up an edge on his cheek that's not even directed at him. It's just an omnidirectional source, but you're feeling that source 400 feet away because of the tone of his skin. And I think it's just beautiful and it's special. And, right here, even on the reverse of Andre Holland, who has lighter skin, you kind of don't feel the blue the same way that you feel here in this image.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause I see,
I think a lot of that. Okay.
Go ahead, Matty, go ahead.
Well, I mean, we have to study as cinematographers and light. When we light for a living, we study each face. We study the entire cast. And as we move along from day 1 to day 20, we're studying those faces. And maybe if we get the benefit of testing, we're studying the faces. And when you look at darker skin tones, there's a color hue shift and there's a color hue dominance on a person's face. You have you could meet a person with dark black skin tone and they're blue. There's a natural coolness to it, or there's a natural warmth to it. And you can see that by eye, and then you adjust accordingly. But the same goes for a white person's face. There's a tonality that you're trying to either exploit or hide. And that's going to, when you're doing this fine-tuned close-up work, then you're responding to that. Like if you had two different skin tones, if you have two different skin tones in a scene, perhaps you're not using a soft light through a frame. Perhaps you're using a Fresnel through a frame and you're focusing it panned right or panned left, favoring one side for more intensity, but you're getting the benefit of the soft light as it spreads through the frame. I mean, it's all these little techniques that we try to use so that we can sort of give the impression of a reality. Because what Tommy said earlier resonates with me, which is, everybody, when we look at people, it's not like somebody's lit differently in a room than the other person. You know what I mean? And yeah. Those are the things in cinema that pop out and just they create a kind of a falsity, to the and then I think it takes you out of the film. And I think the most important thing is to try to keep people in the reality of the film, whatever you decide the reality to be. And so there's a foundation of naturalism that you have to adhere to. And, it's over time that you start to start to take advantage. And it's just about thinking about it all the time. It's about time and thinking about what has worked in the past, what might work now. And color is a big one. Going to what Kiva said, incorporating color to define people. Well, she's unfair. And James knows this. Like looking at her is like she's probably the easiest person to light on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely for sure too. Yeah.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable.
But the thing is, like,
go
ahead, Matty.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
But there, one movie that's in particular that lit black people a hard light that I love is Spike's Mo Better Blues. Ernest Dickerson smashed with hard light on black skin tone in that movie. He used hard light everywhere, but it was a theatrical choice. It went with the movie. So you can do it, but it's a matter of like how you do it. You know what I mean? It's not just turn a light on to see this person. I mean, he had Wesley Snipes in a low light, hard light situation all over the place. It's absolutely stunning. Ernest kicked ass in that movie.
But Wes has a bone structure that works to your advantage as a cinematographer.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's about light position with Wes. Because he is dark, but he's got something. His eyes are extremely expressive, and his facial structure his bone structure is so dominant that he has something else. You know what I mean? To work on our advantage.
African, because we have a guy on our show on Snowfall, Damson, who's the same thing, but Damson is Nigerian, and I think it's very much the West African of the lineage, because like Nigerians have a very strong bone structure. So Damson is like jet black, but he's so easy to light because I can just chisel him out. You know what I mean? It's something that I really started to learn from you, Matty, where it's just like we would roll the camera on some stuff, and Matty's like, "No, just roll the camera." And it's because the bone structure really chisel out dark skin tones a certain way with mixed lighting. So it's like, songs with like this like accent thing, which is not a typical backlight or anything like that. And that bone structure, when you're able to just chisel it out with different grades of like directional soft light, it's absolutely awesome. And I mean, Matty's the person who taught me to jump off he's like, no, just jump in the water. You know what I mean? It's like, you sure? Matty's like, just roll the fucking camera. You know what I mean? And it's going to work. Why? Because you're looking for the nuance.
You're ready.
Yeah. Roll the camera, let's go. And it works, but he's right though. The nuances are when somebody has strong facial features, it's so much easier to light somebody's super dark skin,
For sure. I also say too, like about that goes hand in hand for me in regards to how much top light I tend to use when lighting, films like Beale Street or Moonlight. I feel like Kiva, you can attest to this. I feel like every set we walked into, I was asking for some version of a top light for folks to sort of, express themselves in the space. Generally, it was, you're able to model in a pretty efficient way with just a pretty simple soft top light source. That was sort of our go-to quite often, especially in these scenes we're looking at right now.
Speaking of Roy DeCarava, I mean, this movie right here is like, I've always loved Roy DeCarava. Like when we did, Mike, when we were doing music videos, it's like $25,000 music videos back in the day. It's like I was looking at Roy DeCarava, even though we never got to do that, right? And I've always just like, he was such an influence because he was he was like the Robert Frank for dark skin tones, and like the soft silhouettes that he would shoot and print. I mean, he was a master. And Beale Street was a tour de force in that direction.
Yeah, thanks, man. I mean, it's interesting you talk about you looking at Roy's work when you were doing music videos. It's fascinating to me because I feel like I was just like consuming music videos in my late teens, early 20s, and just could not get enough of them. And I'm sure some of the things, the ones you're referencing, definitely played a role in me thinking about, the early days of me thinking about my style and my approach is heavily influenced from music video worlds, like the hype stuff, etc. I mean, I'm guessing people can probably see that pretty evidently when looking at Moonlight.
I mean, also you got to talk about during that time, of course, like Malik Saeed is a freaking master.
For sure.
But you got to talk about like the still photographers that, you know, they were hanging out with, like Baron Claiborne. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you look at Baron Claiborne's work on Instagram, you'll see a lot of the influence that Malik, you know, I think the two of them used to hang out, and
Wow.
their work, it was like hand in hand for that time period, man. And it's like, it's just awesome. Like the more over moisturizing skin tone with the conjunction with the soft light that's directional, or, you know, big ring lights and all, like Baron was banging that stuff in the 90s aesthetically, which is really kind of great. And that stuff influenced me, James, because that was like my introduction to the business, was being a PA on that stuff. So watching Malik, watching Danny Pearl, who did great stuff during then. I was a PA, like picking up trash and like trying to watch the monitor and what the fuck they were all doing and whatnot. And it totally, like, you know, it's come through, you know. It's like,
Yeah.
this is one of those things. This is Damson, our lead character. He's out of the UK, but he's Nigerian. And it's just like, you can totally mix source and his skin tone. I mean, we still have separation between skin tone and hair. You know what I mean? Like, because of that bone structure that Matty was talking about. What do you think, Jay? 'Cause I mean, Jay, I'm always making our demo board op go crazy, yelling at Justin on the HP.
I mean, you know, I was just going to say, you know, the top light thing is an interesting one, because with any face, their hair is as important in a way, because the hair frames the face.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you're bringing the face out depending on how you're dealing with their hair. And the image, when we're talking about top light, when James was talking about top light, it's that little bit that just sort of defines the shape and their silhouette is so important. Look at that. It's so important. Look at how the hair frames the face. The top light is actually giving us that little bit of light at the top of frame. You know, if it didn't have that, you'd lose that, right? And it's that soft source that just gives you the element of naturalism.
James, in this image, like, what generally, I would imagine how much you got coming out of that thing, Kiva. It's like a foot candle, if that. I mean, what ASA were you working with this kind of stuff? If you're telling me the story about there, and they should tell the story, it's about that's dark enough when the dolly grip is tripping all over the place or whatever it was. You know, it's like, yeah,
that's when you know you're at the right stop, or you're at the right value anyway. But
when everybody has to use a flashlight to see.
Oh, completely. You're in a good space. Exactly.
Yeah, I think that I mean, the show we're talking about is the next one that we worked on, which I think we really pushed the limits and how dark we were lighting things. But Kenny Davis, the dolly grip, we had lit the set appropriately if he was tripping and complaining and couldn't see. This image here, I think we're definitely working at pretty low light levels, but I'd say that Beale Street was more illuminated than any of the other couple movies or shows we've done. Don't you think, James?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. But my memory of this was walking around that 4x4 tile. I mean, that's you know, there's a 4x4 tile in the ceiling and one on the stand, and we had two cameras playing in like a, I don't even know what, 10 by 12 foot room. I mean, it was packed with people, and the only thing that we could put on the floor was I remember one unit, which is kind of a dream. It ended up being wonderful for us, but yeah, there was more light here than generally. You're right. Yeah,
this was just 2 2x8 light tiles in that vaulted ceiling with a bunch of unbleached muslin, and then we had a 4x4 tile that we had on the deck with a ton of unbleached muslin on that, and then the lamps, and that's all we use. There's just not enough space for anything else.
Why?
That's all we needed.
I have a question. Why did you need more stop than usual?
This was for one reason was this was Alexa 65, and I was pretty concerned. Like, so it was trying not to get too shallow on the iris, just to get two eyes sharp and things like that for performance.
Sure. That makes sense.
Yeah.
We have a thing on our show. It's like Justin will tell you. I mean, after Jeff Ferrero kind of like introduced me to these Astera tubes, we're like 0.75 a lot of times. I'll shoot it at 1.6, but like even this image, like I let the background kind of go, but I'm really keying him at 0.75, and then still kind of under him with the Venice approach of it all. And it's just one of those things. I mean, Justin has done a bunch of these shows. He gets hired to do this stuff, and this kind of the same thing. People talk, you got to see me, and it's like, yeah, I'll see you just fine. And I even get it requested now from Damson to like be as dark and as bold and colorful as possible, because it makes a difference and just emotionally what's going on. You know what I mean? Like it just works. It sets a tone even on set, going with the low light level and as colorful as it is. I mean, the actors have seemed to start to respond to it, and and they enjoy it. You know what I mean? Just any configuration of these tubes and ribbons, kind of like our approach. What would you say, Jay?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, even this image right here, definitely. Going with the toppiness, like you, and I agree with Matty. That hair just shapes everything, but I don't think you need a whole lot of light. I don't think lighting black skin tone is just putting a whole bunch of light on somebody. I think it's just a little bit, and it's just what Kiva said. You're just reflecting. You don't need to doubt somebody with light unless it's story motivated. I mean, Bauman, I think you had this picture up with Sidney Poitier. I actually like that art light on him. If that's coming from a street light, I'll be honest with you. Go back to the other one.
Yeah,
I actually like that.
Well, it shapes up definitely. It's like
I think especially that highlight in the bottom of it. Like I actually like that. My thing is with lighting skin tone, I want to retain the actual color of the skin. I've worked with different actors, and I'm trying to keep the brownness of their skin. A lot of times I see a lot of actors who have like gray, like they'll become gray skin tone. We've seen that with like Kevin Hart. With sometimes when we were lighting him, he would turn gray, and people would have some. They would look ashy, whatever the case may be. What I want to do is I want to retain that brown, rich skin tone. That's what I want to retain. And looking at Bill Street, like that's done here in this image. Like you still see brown in this thing, and it's like this cyan color is just also too is a subtle hint of something is happening, something is going on. That's undertone.
Right. Because this is
beautiful.
Like Justin is letting you know that the storyline in here is exactly it. It's just like we use accents to hopefully portray something in the story, because this isn't in our reality of the story. So we have this off base color as an accent on his skin tone to express it's a different timeline than what was happening in the episode. But we still hold true that his skin still looks real to a certain level. You know what I mean? It's not, even though it's a bit theatrical, but yet there's still a sense of reality in, Damson's skin itself. It's one of those things I love. There's so much information in the bottom of the curve of a lot of the cameras and the new film stocks that there's no reason not to be able to play down in that bottom of the signal of it all. It's fun. I mean, it's no reason not to fucking jump in the pool. You know what I mean?
The thing about it is too, I mean, Tom, you can attest to this. It's like this looks probably lit to people, but if you were to walk on our set, like the actors are like, is this a night scene? Is this a day scene? Like, what is this? Because the light levels are so, they're so low. We're not, turning on everything. And my electrics are like, is that all we're using? Just a light, just a light mat. That's all we're doing. And so we're keeping up with
Go look at the monitor.
Yeah.
Go look at the monitor.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I think the
I
thing
was
that's
going to say.
interesting too. Oh, go ahead, Matty. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Mike.
I was just going to say what's interesting is when you're at this level too, is you're able to take the environment and really play the textures of the environment, the color of the environment way more. Like, as now it's like, okay, let me just take a source 4 and bounce into the wall and put it at like 10 or 15 points just to get a little color from that wall. And you'll see it and you're making large reflective sources within the set itself, but not using it as a bounce, not like like normally it would have been, oh, let's just bring in a 4x4 bounce or something and a white bounce and bang into it. Now it's like I find, you're carving things out within the set and swinging it around just very slowly just to find out where the highlight falls in the face. And again, that reflectivity is really where it seems where the life is at. And it's a really great space to play in lighting wise.
I was going to say that, a lot of, speaking of trends, because everything's gravitating to a lower light level because of our sensitivity of our cameras. And, when's the last time you saw a hard backlight? We don't do that anymore. It's just like people don't do it. This is because it just speaks. It doesn't speak the truth, really. So it's rare that you're going to have a backlight unless you're outside at the right time of day, right? So, and if you turn around, there shouldn't be a motherfucking backlight on that person. You know what I mean? We adhere to naturalism more, I think, than we used to have to. But makeup artists have also they've also evolved because there was a day back we used to powder everybody because the light was harder and the levels were harder and they didn't want them to look like they were sweating, right? Today, like, how many times does a makeup artist come up to us and say, we're going for a shinier thing, a more natural look? Well, yeah, of course you are, because you want them to pop from the architectural lighting that Mike speaks of. You know what I mean? And it just speaks to the reality. It's how we see people, and like that's, I can't say enough. I think anybody who has fear of, photographically of dealing with it. One, it's like if you just sort of, it's the one tenet for me is just like everybody has to look like they exist in the same space.
Yeah,
for sure.
I remember the first time I had heard somebody really speak of using reflectivity in large sources. I remember when I was, I was an electrician on some commercial or some show or reshoots or something with Janusz, and he was talking about how they lit sections of Amistad with like 1.5 foot candles or 2 foot candles, by putting up like a 20 by bounce and just pushing some light into that and then working off the reflectivity. And that was the first time I had heard somebody really running with that ball. And that was the core part of some of his lighting on that, which was an eye opener for me. This was like in 96 or 97. So,
Hey, Mike, so this image that you have up right now, like Damson doesn't have makeup. He just puts on some lotion, like some basic like CVS lotion. He's like, all right, let's go. Like, because his skin already has a level of natural
CVS,
and straight up, like not even like really expensive.
CVS,
some cheap lotion, and he's like, whatever, like let's do it.
I'm making too much money. It came out of your pocket then.
Right. Reached in my little fucking monitor cart. I took my lotion off what I got from my hands. And you could probably give it to him, but it's like, here's an example. We just chisel them out with like a pencil light, and I just let the background do what it do. You know what I'm saying? Like we have a pencil light above them and, a couple stops under, but because the skin already has moisture in it, you don't need to do much else. Like some of the old timers, some of that bad makeup really stopped them from being seen. Like I had a job with Cedric the Entertainer, and he was wearing a black hat and a nighttime exterior with a black shirt, and the ceiling was only 6.5 feet. And me and Justin were sitting in a 12 by 12 room with him and 3 other people, and we had to light him. And it was just like, are you kidding me? And it was like, you guys give him a little bit more moisture. Don't give him that old cakey makeup that used to do, because that actually helped us out a lot more. Because think the ceiling's just above hat level for him, a black hat with a dark-skinned black man with a black shirt on, and there's 3 other skin tones in there. It was just like, oh my God. But once you moisturize a little bit, it really helps to be able to use that reflectivity and to hide things around that you don't need that much light. But some of that old-timey makeup really will just kill you,
Plus it's just healthy. It's healthy to moisturize in general. We should all do it.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Especially when you have to wash your hands all the time. You got to do that to your hands.
That's true. That's true.
Matty, you talk a bit about like, because we're talking about what's great is we got a lot of different budget levels here. And, and what seems to be distilling is that like a lot of these approaches across the board, doesn't matter if you got money or not money, these are the challenges you're going to face. And I know like, some of the work you did on this, because this was a pretty tight budget on this show. And you kind of,
yeah.
I mean, you sent some of these stills over, and there's a lot of great work there. I think, this image speaks to what you were saying, Kiva, just about, angles and reflective qualities and sources that are off frame and things like that, doing, getting great separation.
I mean, that's a case point where there is a top light there for, the beauty of the top light is it just gives you that ability to have a bit of an edge, like a natural edge, wherever they move, and they give them a little space to move. The actor can actually improvise and actually not be tied by a small box to work in. And then you could be a little more focused with your softer low sources, and then, when you want to see the face, you have to block accordingly. But in a scene like this, where, we didn't want to tell him to be in a specific spot. We knew he'd end up at the light. I just had to cover the shadow area with a little bit of top light so that he's defined. But, and I had the benefit, I just worked a little cooler on the top light, and then, because I knew the warmth of the fire would contrast that. I just try to adhere to naturalism. Like if you look at the light in the background, I played that straight, white light, a little bit warmer than your usual tungsten, but they're just sort of, you're articulating tungsten a little warmer because that's how people, I think, at least that's the way my eye thinks. And the top light's cooler than that. And then the warmth of 2,000, 2,300 degrees on the flat.
I think what Matty is pointing to is exactly it. It's like nothing's really played straight, especially that's really kind of like the essence that you get rid of the edge light, but then different types of dual tonality within the skin tone becomes that old school edge in essence, because of the face structure is now, as you turn to one source versus the other, daylight versus sunlight, it's like on that same premise. And even in a room, as people's lamps around their houses and whatnot are not the same color temperature of old school fluorescent, maybe in the kitchen versus like the tungsten warmth that comes from above in the dining room, and understanding that you can see it, as Kiva said, in brown skin tone quite easily, great example right there. There's like 3 different color hues within there, but you don't need like a hard light to like necessarily cut him from behind, but it definitely lines him a little bit, but he can move around in the room and still be seen, and his face can be defined, which is quite beautiful. Look at this guy.
To speak to something that James said earlier, everybody does get to see the monitor. Some actors don't look, some actors do, but the director's looking at it. And when you're working with Rashid Johnson in this case, or Barry Jenkins, or even F. Gary Gray, you have somebody who's an advocate for a look, right? And then that's where you can succeed. When you're fighting that at all times, that's when you all of a sudden you're basically walking with a limp when you're not when you don't have the support from that end of things.
That's a great point.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
I think that's what made some of that Hype Williams stuff really kind of great, is that support that I think Malik had to do some really great work and take some really bold chances over the years in terms of how to photograph black skin tone. When you look at that stuff from the 90s, I mean, Matty's totally correct. You got to have filmmakers to support you in terms of really make the bold choices. Spike's one of them too. I mean, Spike lets Matty take free reign, whatever he wants. So,
I wouldn't say free.
Oh, get out of here.
I wouldn't say free.
He has the gold card. He has the golden ticket of anybody ever seen work with Spike. Matty got the golden ticket. That's years of trust. Trust me.
It's a black card. Black card.
Black card? The Filipino guy with the black card.
They haven't seen that one before. I mean, there you go.
Yeah.
That's a good example of just like, look how many soft sources are moving around. Like, what are these lights doing?
Yeah,
Some of them
but
aren't
it's
even
like,
pointed at anything.
yeah. But that is interesting when you're talking about that, Matty, because it's like when you're at these kind of levels, and like you said, you have this top source up there, and you're just panning it off because maybe what's a more interesting character out of it is how it's falling off on the wall, and just the natural fall off. And I remember when we were in film school, and when Conrad Hall came in, and here we're going in the Wayback Machine, but he talked about taking 20Ks and just full spot and just banging them into the floor, basically the same concept but scaled up to the ASA he had to work at the time. And you just line up, give me 420Ks, I mean, which is a huge thing, and banging them into the floor, into the wall, or into the ceiling, full spot. So it was just about having that fall off and that level of control, and then just taking the edge of the beam and using that to start to light some of the face, if anything's going to hit him directly, and the most of the light is hitting a wall or something, and you're getting all that great bounce quality to it and things like that. And that's kind of this is a bit of a nod to that in a certain way.
Something I'll also mention in regards to like this idea of directionality is really interesting. I remember Kiva and I doing Moonlight. We did that movie in I think like 25 days. It was pretty quick, and there was just no time to finesse. I mean, like I don't think the grips ever got a flag off the truck. I think for the most part, Kiva was lighting these sets, and there he is with the Holy One light now.
Yeah.
And I think what was interesting about that was, going into the DI with my colorist a few months later, something he said which was really interesting to me was he actually thought there was a lot of fill in the rooms we were shooting. And he was asking me, did I set up, going back to what Matty was talking about earlier, did I set up a lot of fill light? And I was like, are you insane? No, I definitely didn't do any fill light in the entire show. But what was interesting about that was because the reason why I think he thought that was there was no directionality of anything. There was no cut. There was no shape. It was sources that were bouncing around in small rooms. And you can do, here's Kiva with with his one light on a pole here. You can do so much with so little. And especially when you're photographing people of color, like they're going back to the reflectivity part of this conversation. It doesn't take a lot if you're just going to be creative with color and shape and positioning of the unit. You can just get so far at this point, especially considering all the technology, obviously.
Well, what do you guys, because one of the things in lighting changing is, as lighting has changed, is like we were saying earlier about when we were on that one scene on Birds of Prey, where all of a sudden it was like flag diffusion, just because, of that particular thing. It was a complete flashback of like 15 years. But like, now when I'm on set, it's like, yes, you're using flags, but it's like, it's not anywhere near where it was like set up one light and here's 10 flags in front of it. And I find like for, most of the light control that we're doing is happening on top of it, is actually within the light itself, almost contained within that. And then maybe some duvetine or some bobbinet to slow down certain areas and things like that. It's interesting. I like, again, like as we're saying, the technology is changing in a way that is emphasizing some more of this naturalism.
Yeah. Also where black is just as important as white when it comes to doing this situation. Like if I can take away a lot of the light and keep it, mainly from one direction, be it from up top or anywhere else, and I can black out as much as possible to just feel that light source do what it do, either, vertically coming down or broad, one way or the other, it helps out a ton. Even with black skin tone, taking away light, it just helps contour as much as possible. That's always my thing with my key grip is like, if you can put up black faster than I can get Justin to put up a couple of stereotubes, then, like even here, like the ceiling is all blacked out and we may have like two sources, one hard unit, and then we have one other unit behind him. Yeah. And, this brother is different complexion than our lead character. And black to me is just as important. So I can contour quite quickly. A lot of times, a lot of natural light, and it just looks great. And maybe I'll just put up one source instead. I can get up quite fast, here it's just, it's just a couple of sources here. We just have, 18s outside, but then over the top, it's just a couple of tubes, right, Jay? I mean, what do we do here? I mean,
yeah, we just had one tube, one Astera tube, and then outside is just 18s.
yeah, just to edge out the flow, separate. And I crossed out this as well. And that's one thing I got to give to Matty is like, Matty's like, if it looks good, let's shoot it. If we can cross it, sure, I can do it for you. And like, I've seen him do that repeatedly because he's lighting the environment a certain way that people, both directions, do look good. So we can shoot that out if it looks good, and then let's make it happen. You know what I mean? And don't be scared to do it. Like with today's like sources, that soft light over the top of them, single source, is going to be directional. Because I'm bringing it to just one side of their face for both characters. So they'll have a dark side, and if it falls on the same side, then I can cross it up quite easily. I saw him bang it out on Compton a bunch, and I was like, you know what? He's right. Just go for it, And it's quite fun and nice, and everyone loves it because it gets you through your day a little bit faster, but you don't have to redo a whole lighting setup in order to facilitate the turnaround, because you're lighting the environment a certain way with what the tools are, and understanding that, the low exposure, it gives you that opportunity to do it,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we did have some stills here from Compton, and it's like, there's some great stuff here when you're talking about, because obviously, the other challenge in this one, I'm sure, was just everybody's wearing, there's a heavy use of baseball cap.
You were talking about black hat, black shirt. I mean, Gary wanted these guys in white T-shirts from the Compton swap meet specifically, and all like new era baseball caps. Everybody, no matter where they were. I was like, all right, but but I didn't want to, the goal was for the camera to feel like it was capturing snapshots of the time. So I didn't want to just set and reset. So I just used a lot of smoke. I basically lit smoke so that it would lift into there. And then because the light sources, the thing is, the harder the light, the more reflectivity you're going to get. It's just a physics thing, right? And the softer the light, the less reflectivity. So that's how we dealt with the white shirts. But then the smoke lifted the faces under the baseball cap. So.
Yeah. I was talking earlier about going to the Wayback Machine, and I'm trying to find it here where the stills. Oh yeah. Like one of the movies I did that I gaffed was with Morrow and Training Day. And that was really a film like we're talking about, and this was 20 years ago. So we were talking about like techniques that evolved during the course of it. Cause we were starting to really use more Kino flow and things like that then, and certainly like, that's where that concept of reflectivity came in, because on this picture, because we were definitely using hard light, like, we would, and like we had stuff where we'd be, edging him out and all this kind of thing. Moments like this, and I mean, this is a big area, and it's the same concept of like, you've got a lot of people to cover. You got multiple cameras working. You're serving a lot of needs there. But then it was like, and we had a lot of car interior in that job too, which was, at the time, it was new technology, which is the 3.3K soft sun, bashing those things through the front window, because that was the only way you could have something that you could get a good value in and have a long linear source. And it was kind of like, even though it was soft, whatever they would call it, was, it's a pretty hard source. We've all used those things. But we also started experimenting a lot in that job with just like, different types of color and things like that. And this concept of introducing some color into there. But I mean, it is this was the first job where I started really to use a lot more soft sources and qualities like that, and I mean, with, Denzel, I mean, his face is fantastic to light, and it's an interesting right now, because I'm on the picture I was working with him right before this, when everything shut down. I mean, he's in it and hadn't worked with him since Training Day. And it's just like, it's such a real joy to light his face. It's like, wow, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, Tommy and Matty, about like structure and bone and things like this. And it's just a real pleasure.
Well, Mike, what was your approach on this stuff? Was it really like were you dealing with gelling Kinos, or were you doing it like bounce sword? No.
It was a lot of, I mean, look, we were still, I mean, obviously we're shooting film, we were shooting anamorphic. So we needed to throw some light in there, and we did a bunch of it on, if I remember right, we did use a fair amount of 500, but it was, you know, it was tungsten and HMI, and then, you know, and then we would be taking Kinos, and it was like with a 216 on the front of it to make the source a little bit brighter. I'm sorry, a little bit broader, you know? So that's how you know, now it'd be like, it's so interesting, like how, as we're saying, how technology changes because the image capture is changing, like how, you know, and I use a Kino Flow now, and it's just, you don't have the kind of subtle levels that you used to with back of those technologies. Yeah, just shut off some tubes and you'd be in the zone. Now it's like, you know, 1 tube low output is still like way too much light. So, you know, so yeah, I mean, it was usually basically trying to throw as much light through the windows and things like that to get, and then bringing something around inside just to work on the face. And, you know, we use that also as kind of like, you know, on the night exteriors, you know, giving edges, that kind of thing. And then just have either a Kino or something through a frame as a soft source. And then we had, for our night exterior work in that picture, we had, you know, at the end of the movie, we had, you know, it was just balloons. It was just like, give me a low level ambient top light. Same concept. The tools were a little more crude, but and then just, you know, we hung a bunch of fixtures, like kind of what Kiva was talking about earlier. Just, you know, so you've got practical sources in the background, things that get reflections, things that motivate light sources. And yeah, I mean, it was, go ahead.
Do you, Matty, see yourselves, and James, this is a question for everybody, do you guys see yourself using one type of like diffusion? Like I did a job with Bob Richardson, and he is Mr. like muslin all day with like 12 light maxis. Like it was like I did a 4-day job with him, and everything is one side, 12 light maxis, him and Ian, and they line them up. And it's like always a bounce. It's a book light, a 12 by 20 book light, and there's like 3 of them only with Muzz. Bounce with Muzz, through Muzz. You know what I mean? Like there's stuff that me and Jay do, but I'm curious to see what you guys do in terms of like, is there like are there certain things that you always find yourself going towards when dealing with brown skin tones? I'm curious.
For me, I'll just say,
James, James.
Yeah, I was sorry. I'm just going to run in just and say, you know, unbleached Muzz has been, you know, the saving grace for me. I feel like I'm on unbleached Muzz all the time, or bleached Muzz, and usually I'll differentiate it between a daytime interior or a nighttime interior, based on whether it's bleached or unbleached. And then, you know, grids seem to be a flavor of choice. But I'd say like the images that I'm most pleased by and the things I'm most excited about, in terms of, you know, what diffusion's been on what source, it's been a muslin, generally speaking.
Matty, what are you gonna say?
I mean, for me, I don't. Sometimes, to me, it's always different. It's sometimes it's Muzz, sometimes it's Magic Cloth, sometimes it's Light Grid. Those are the 3 I usually go to. But then sometimes you got to take something, go a little light. Like if you do want to get a light in the eyes, when you put a Magic Cloth up, you don't see the source, so it doesn't show up in the eyes as a point source. So sometimes I go lighter on if I want to find the eye and put something in the eye, then I go maybe lighter on that, so that the point source is actually in the eye. Because like sometimes you'll dull it with a heavy diffusion, and you're just putting more light on the face, which you don't want to do. You know, you're just trying to get something in the eyes, and you know, when you're working at certain light levels, say, and you could just put up a source, and it's not going to overtake the shot, but it's going to be as again, going to what Mike said, lighting a corner so you're not getting light level. You're lighting a corner so it shows up on the face as a reflection. The same goes for something you're trying to get something in the eyes. Sometimes you just want a reflection in the eyes. It's got to be a source. It doesn't have to be, you know, a tweenie like back in the day, but it could be anything, as long as you can get that heat from a distance that shows it up there. So I'll always, I mean, it's hard. If I had to pick one, I love muslin too, but I change it up depending on what it is.
I think it's also, you know, oh, go ahead, Kiva.
Just we're using unbleached muslin and bleached muslin for when we're swapping from days to nights, and usually layering it up and billowing it, so we're not getting any sort of specular source through the muslin. And we're, you know, it is a pain in the ass to swap it out on the top lights when you are swapping from day to night. And I feel like the grip department over a long show is ready to wring my neck, but it's worth it in the image, I think.
That's all that counts.
That's right.
That's all
I mean,
that
a
counts.
lot of people. Well, here's one for you, because a lot of folks are asking. We're just looking at some of the questions. A lot of folks are asking, how do you talk about lighting two people with different skin tones in the same scene? And I mean, look, I go back to Training Day, where you have got Denzel and you got Ethan Hawke, and that's a pretty extreme contrast range when the two of them are in the same scene. And I was thinking of, I was talking to Jeff Webster, who's the gaffer on Mandalorian, and he would have to do scenes with Carl Weathers and the Mandalorian sitting next to each other. And so it's, I found different ways of approaching that situation, but I was curious kind of how you handle that, because a lot of folks have been asking about that.
For me, I start.
ahead,
if I just real quick, I think one place to start right off the bat is blocking.
Good point.
Contributing to the blocking is important, and then when you have a trust with the director and the actors, you could say, if you guys flipped positions, what if you were there and they were there? Would that work out for you guys? They know what you're getting at. They know what you're saying, and they might do it. And if that doesn't work, then all of a sudden, I turn to you or Kiva or Justin and be like, okay, you fix this shit. I did what I could do.
for me on Insecure, what I basically did, I would just like the black skin tone, and when that fell in place, you could always lift up a little bit. Because Insecure season 2, that's what I did too. Toppy, Bella Light, or Jim Ball, whatever the case may be with Muzz. I would just place Issa or Ebon or whoever the place where they need to be, and for me, the white skin tone fell into place. If that ever for me, so I'm really not trying to, like I said, put light on them. Just put her where she needed to be, and everybody else fell into place. To be honest with you.
Yeah,
I'll just piggyback on that. I mean, I completely agree with what Justin's saying. I mean, I feel like I tend to do the same with my work as well. And it's so interesting having this conversation. I feel like, because I think what I'm hearing from everyone talking is really how simple this issue is. I mean, we're having this conversation because it's important and people need to hear it, of course. But what's fascinating to me hearing everyone speak is just like, this shouldn't be an issue. It's the truth of it. Nothing we're doing and talking about right now is like brain surgery. It's being, going back to what Maddie's been talking about a lot, is being truthful and being like honest and direct about some of these things. And it shouldn't be such a complicated process. I definitely agree with Justin. Like, I tend not to fuss about with more flags or peeking someone out and this and that. Things will fall into place. And I say that knowing full well that I'm in a very lucky position, being a cinematographer at this time in technology. I fully realized that what I'm talking about right now probably wouldn't be possible 20 years ago or something like that, right? But it is today, and I think it's important to be using the tools of today. Obviously, I mean, I think I saw earlier in your block of images, Mike, a photo of Don Cheadle that Kiva and I worked on from a TV show called Black Monday, and we all know Don. I mean, his skin is relatively dark, and but I didn't fuss about with it too much. I didn't want Don to look bright. I didn't want Don to look a different shade.
He never does.
Yeah. Well, that's the truth too. Of course, agreed. Is that you'll be fighting a losing battle, but that's also important to recognize is not to, not to try to fix that, because it's nothing to fix. Let's say, I think that's sort of how to talk about it as well. This isn't a problem, right? These are not problems that we as photographers need to fix. This is just about showing people like what they look like. I mean,
Here's a thing.
What the man looks
it's
like.
If you're shooting ectochrome or you're doing like a really extreme LUT, then the conversation may be different. You know what I mean? If like we're shooting, like if you look at something like Clockers, where what did Malik? He shot Ektachrome on that, I believe. Is that right, Matty? Was it Ektachrome Malik did
Yeah,
on that?
it was 52. It was the first version of 5285, so it was Ektachrome. It wasn't Kodachrome. It was Ektachrome.
Right. So Ektachrome has an extreme curve. That's a very extreme situation. In that case, the approach and us handling it may be different. Or if you have like an extreme LUT that's supposed to look like Ektachrome, where the curve is very extreme, then we will have to handle it differently. But a lot of us aren't doing that, you know, except for certain areas of a film. But for the most part, since we're not doing a whole approach that way, then you can play kind of straight and put your key person at a spot, and then everyone else will fall through. But if you're doing something extreme, your exposure, you know, a third of a stop is going to change the image. Then I would say our approach would have to be quite different with two different skin tones in the frame. You know what I mean? Like, but we're not, and you can't even get that stuff anymore anyways to shoot. So, you know,
Well, I
like
think
a reason to reapproach it. You know,
I think the thing is,
Hey, Mike.
like, yeah.
Remember we had Cheadle in the we had Cheadle in an Iron Man suit on Iron Man 2. He was walking away from a B-3 bomber. First of all,
This is in Palmdale.
he wanted to be on Apple boxes. And like the fucking suit was shiny and the light was like at 1 o'clock behind him.
Yes.
And I'm like, what the fuck? We said, fuck it. We just put up HMIs. We literally like lined up like 4 HMIs left and right of camera, like, fuck it, go ahead. You know,
Well,
it's going to make the suit look better anyway.
It was. It was like, I remember that. You're right. I
He was
totally forgot
wearing
about that.
he was wearing a chrome fucking ball.
Chrome silver. Exactly. It was crazy. And I do remember that. It was like, because it was like, we got to shoot. And of course, we're on, I think is it Andrews Air Force Base or Edwards, whichever one is out in Palmdale. B-2 bomber. Everyone's on their game, you know, and he's standing there on Apple boxes. And it's just like, I remember both. And it's, you know, it's like 100 degrees and wearing the suit. And it's just like, well, what are you going to do? You know, it's like, here we go. Oh God. I have some funny photos of that one. Yeah. That was, but you just, you know, I mean,
That's the thing.
yeah, it speaks to what you were saying, Tommy. But I was going to say is I think the thing is that in all the vocabulary everybody's using here, it's like, it's lighting a face is not just about the light on the face. I mean, like, you know, you look at this image here, you've got practicals in the background, you've got top light, you've got, you know, when people say to me, oh, what'd you use as a key light? To me, like the concept of a key light, which I understand historically how it played, it is, you know, what the hell is a key light? I mean, it's like, you know, it's, that concept has evolved so much because it's like, you know, like, I don't think, I mean, even when we were doing Birds of Prey, you know, I mean, you've got Margot, who is, you know, incredibly reflective in her character in that one, playing up against a lot of other people of different skin tones. And it was like, you know, what the concept of a key light is. And that is just, it's just such a, I think it's like I don't want to say it's a relic of the past, but it's definitely a different concept for me right now. It's like, you know, because like you were saying about using smoke and using, you know, lotion on the face or working with the makeup department, or, you know, how are you achieving separation? Because I was thinking, I saw this image from Beale Street, you know, like this, like, you know, you obviously you're lighting her face, but you've got the nice, you know, got the reflectivity of the material in the background and things like this. And, you know, here it's like, you've got a hotter thing happening there. And so there's a lot of ways you're achieving contrast in an interesting image using other things of the set. So when you're talking about, you know, that concept of it.
Mike, to follow that up and what Justin and Maddox were talking about as well, you know, as a technique, James is definitely asked to do this, and some of the other images have this too, but pounding hard light in that's not necessarily touching the characters, but it's just nailing the floor and banging around the space. And that first image of Dawn was that exact technique where, you know, all these surfaces end up lighting the people. So there's like the surface of that door that's catching his cheek there, and just all this different part of the environment ends up lighting the people in a more interesting way than if you had tried to light them, you know, with a key light.
Yeah.
I remember, yeah, it's slightly off topic a little bit, but that only happens obviously when you're working with low light. Obviously, you can allow a reflective bounce off of a wall to do that. I remember, this is definitely off topic a little bit, but it sort of goes to show how low light we're working on these days. Is like, I remember reading an article about Steven Soderbergh shooting The Knick, and when he was watching dailies, everyone's eyes looked crazy because their pupils were wide open. Because he was, at so low levels that you couldn't see the color of anyone's eye anymore. Their eyes were wide. And so it's just, again, like this idea about technology. Now we're able to get a bounce off of a pretty dark colored door. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah. It's tape all the indicator lights on everything, because anything behind camera that has a little LED is a problem.
Right. You totally see it. You know what I've done?
I mean, to go back to what Tommy was saying, if you had a heavy LUT, sometimes you might, like say you're doing a film that is asking you to work at a heavier contrast level, and you don't have the latitude that we're used to having, we're taking advantage of, then you have to reach into your skill set to try to figure out how to make it look to achieve the quality of light at a higher level. And pull the faces out, and it goes back to what Justin said about reflectivity. Maybe it is a large source, and maybe it's like the 4x4 you guys were talking about in that room on Beale Street. It's a 4x4, but it's not working at 10% right now. It's going to be working at 50%, or 75%. And then you just have to do the math. But you can still use the same concepts. It's like the door ceases to be the help that it used to be. Now it's going to be a card, or it's going to be a bleach muzz, or it's going to be something else. So we still have those tools because we still have that skill set. It's just about doing the math to lift up the areas to achieve the things we could achieve now. It's important to know that you might be asked.
Yeah, I mean, to jump on to what Maddie's talking about, one thing I do, if like the practical's in the shot, sometimes I'll put an additional light underneath the practical and just blow it up. You know what I mean? So it hits the wall behind it and the practical, so it illuminates even more. And the reason why I'll use like a lamp, a unit, is so that I can change the color of it, or have a bulb is not enough. Then the camera pans through it, then you see this bright practical, which people kind of are accepting of. But yet the practical, especially if it's kind of a large source, will key that brown skin tone as like a cheat. So when you pass through it, it's like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh shit, you don't really register that there's something else possibly blowing it up if you do have something else in there. And it also hits the ceiling above it. So it's like practical, hit it, and then it leaks and hits the ceiling, which top light again comes down a little bit. And then the practical illuminates laterally, all from like one source. And then I can carry the person, because like this one unit that's hidden on the ground, like fucking is just doing double duty for them. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like here, like I would have something emulating that. I may hit that with the unit, but that unit, when they get to the edge of the bed, lights her, but then it also helps me when I pan away and pan through it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's some of those things me and Justin just try to figure out. How can I have something in the shot that's going to light them and still give me a bit more juice without it being overbearing, especially if you have the unit on the back side, like the Fresnel unit on the back side of the practical. So the front side isn't a nuclear, it's the back side, which hitting the wood wall, hits that, reflects against that, and then it goes up into the ceiling. It's just like some random thing me and Justin have found over the time.
No, and it works great. I mean, I can't tell you, there's many a time where I'm bouncing, hey, just get a pancake, a little apple box, and just put that thing on the floor and bang into that. Color of that, it just feels better. It is interesting. Speaking of white light and how, like, I don't even know how often, like, we're using, like, okay, this light's at 3200 or it's at 5600. I mean, it's always like, that's cool, but it's like eating potato chips all day. It gets boring real quick. I remember when we used to light with like a lot of Kino flow back in the day, that it was like, I'd have 2 carts in the truck just of Kino, and we did a lot with that. And it was a great useful tool. But after a while, you're just like, wow, it is so good at being beautiful and all that. It was a little too much of that stuff. I mean, I think about Justin, I was just thinking about the story you were telling me the other day. And this is a great story about use of color in white light. And it's all about your man, Bob Ross,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's him.
But I think what's interesting about this is it speaks to a lot of things. The first thing it speaks to, and I'll let you run with the story, but it speaks to the fact that our references come from all sorts of different spaces, you know, and so yeah, I mean, talk a bit about it because this is great.
You know, it's just something that I think Living Up. Well, I love this guy's show. You know, if you don't, I'm sorry, but I love this guy's show. But one thing that I noticed about Bob Ross was that he never used like straight white paint. You know, he put like a little bit of purple, or he put a little bit of red, or he put a little bit of gray, something in there. And that's something that I've learned to put on, like, you know, skin tones, you know, darker skin tones, is to add just a little bit of pink, just a little bit of purple, just a little bit of that, you know, just to bring something alive. And I think, like, even looking at his skin tone, it's like I would put something of a light something just to bring alive, you know, skin tones. And it doesn't necessarily have to be so, you know, extravagant of like cyan or, you know, all of these different colors, but just adding a little bit. And that's just something that I noticed from him, is that he never used really like straight white paint to do to make clouds or water, different things like that. He would always add just a little bit of something to it. And that's something that I like doing. You know, I think it brings alive, and it's something I can't explain. It's just something that for me is just intuitive. Like, this is missing something here. Let's try this, you know, and I fell in love with it.
Hey, Mike, here's a question for you to add to that. Does Matty play anything straight in terms of color, anything?
Hey, I mean, I will say, well, no, I know, but I'll say this. My wife and I were talking about this morning, just like how we all have evolved, and you know, everyone, it doesn't matter if you're a musician, cinematographer, whatever, everyone evolves, and it's been really interesting, you know, because you know, when we were doing Birth of Prey, just to see like how, and I think it speaks to the technology, it speaks to the, you know, an image capture and on lighting. It's just, no, I mean, he doesn't, you know, it's like but it was so interesting because we could say, hey, let's put the camera white point at this, let's put it at 4,000, let's drop the lights to 2,000 or to 2,500 or 3,000. Okay. You know, you run a very complicated offense, but but the results are really good because you can make a lot of changes really quick. And so, which is like, and what Kiva was saying a while back was just like, you can't go into set and, okay, let's clear the set, get some ladders up here, hang some new gel or something like that. Those creative choices didn't exist at the level they have now. And to some people, they think that's like, oh my God, there's too many choices and too many mind changing and all this stuff. But you know, I mean, you see that the path is one of like, okay, this is a good idea, and you can make those adjustments very quickly. And then it is certainly like, you know, look, I mean, like, I mean, Matty's one of the, I mean, I'll just say this, he's one of the few cinematographers I work with who look at the white point of the camera as another tool that is, there's no sacred cow there. Like some cinematographers, and everyone does great work. This is not a knock on anybody's approach, because the thing I found as a gaffer is just everyone has their own unique way of doing it. And it's like, it's totally fine. And you know, I mean, I was working with Bruno Del Bonel right now, and it's fantastic, but you know, he has a different approach to his process. And but with Matty, it's like, you know, the white point of the camera is another great tool, and which was really interesting, especially on that film, because we had a lot of color, and how we were using color in that stuff, whether it's in the costumes or the, you know, the makeup and all that, was really it was another variable to it, which is, it's like you were saying, James, it's just like, it's crazy time, shit you couldn't do 20 years ago.
Yeah. Well,
Go ahead, James. Not James, go ahead.
I was just going to say what's super interesting about that is something actually that you, Maddox, mentioned a minute ago, which is what audiences will accept these days is also another aspect of this conversation too, where, you know, I think 30, 40 years ago, the kind of colors we're thrown into our images these days would not have necessarily gone down the way they're going down now. And I think that's, you know, has come out of, you know, decades of commercials looking the way they do, print photography looking the way it does, music videos obviously huge, and you know, and then you know, cinema of the last 12, 15 years. But what's cool now is that we just happen to live in a time and work in a time where all these things are really accepted. You know, the idea of a blown out lamp, talking about Maddox a minute ago, or the idea of, you know, the image that you had up a minute ago, I think Maddox, you were talking about it, the idea that, you know, windows don't have detail in them. that's a concept that I'm not sure it would have been as so acceptable so many years prior. Look at 1950s films, and the idea is to match the value of the outside to the inside, which obviously has huge effects upon how we're lighting sets, of course. And audiences' sort of acceptability of what we're feeding them too is actually part of an interesting part of this conversation as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you got to take your hat off.
I agree with that.
Like Robbie Mueller with, Paris, Texas, and Malik and those guys like taking chances early on of these bold tonalities, and even like Danny Pearl's, like that stuff is nothing but great. And it's like, this stuff I learned, that's why I give Matty a lot of praise, because I asked that question. It was a loaded question to you, Mike, because I would just, I'm operating for Matty, and coming from the AFI of it all, like you guys, and then just seeing it repeatedly, nothing is played straight. There's never a time Matty's not gonna play it straight, because every story is different. You know what I mean? And it's like taking those chances affect the brown tonality, and it just does really beautiful stuff. And it was just like, it's been nothing but a pleasure over the years to just like watch it, and you never question it, and just watch it, and it works repeatedly. You know what I mean? And that's what makes makes it really freaking special. When I'm looking through and I'm looking at color temp, I'm looking at the things that him and Kowalczyk are doing and having to set the camera at, and him and Stens, and it's like, okay, I get it. And Justin will tell you, like, there's never a camera set at 5600, 5400. It's like it maybe 5000.
Well, it's like that show, Top Chef, man. Every lighting setup is like a quick fire challenge of cooking.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like, all right, you got to feed this many people, and you got to use all your talents to fucking make it happen. If you, I was just gonna say, it's like dealing with like a room full of people. The one thing I typically do is try to find that face that is going to be like you talked about Margot Robbie, for example, Mike. Like what is the face in the scene that's going to dictate where we expose the whole scene? You know what I mean? Because it's like then you work in the grayscale, and you're working in the remember we had Sajid Ray's DP come into AFI. You remember that, Mike?
Yeah.
It was he came in, and the first thing he did was hold up a grayscale, and he said do ra mi fa sol la. What do you say? Do re mi fa sol la.
Yeah. Yep.
And I was like, that's some deep shit.
No, it was mind blowing.
Like
it was.
It was mind blowing. It was mind blowing, and like it's one of those concepts that we, when you're first starting out, you don't get, right. And then we were lucky enough to come in when film was still dominant, and you really did start to adhere to it. And like I worked with Ed Lockman, who adhered to it, and he used the zone system. And it's like you take 5 different skin tones in a scene, like in different complexities, and you try to figure out which is the face that you're going to take that reflective reading that's going to make all of them, fit together. And I think that those again, because again, it goes to the skill set of what you have. Because at the end of the day, it is simple. I agree, and it's not rocket science. But there's still a bit of alchemy and craft to what we do. That is like that we that we especially through history that we've learned, because we're such enthusiasts for what we do. All the things of the past can't be lost in the present, and the grayscale is one. I know IREs and values like that, but it's like sometimes Mike still reads foot candles on the set, and I still use a meter on a set because I don't want to get lost. And but like that's just one technique I've used for multiple skin tones. It's like I try to figure out who the big. It's not the person that's the problem. Who's the one in the middle? Like, who's the one in the middle?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when he came in, and it was just like such a mind-blowing concept. We were at AFI, and he's like, he just has this grayscale, and he's like, this is like if you're a singer, and this is your scale, and you need to. When you wake up in the morning, this should be hanging on your wall. I think he said something like that. Like that's the first thing you're going to look at.
Yeah, and
it was like, wow. I mean, I had never even thought of anything like that. And it was interesting about the time period when we were at school there, because like we had like John Alonzo and you know, some folks who had a lot of deep history in cinematography who were somebody better mute Kiva's mic. Oh my God.
The sound man. You gotta turn it down.
Sound department is killing it today. Yeah, thank you, Jake. Thank you. Anyway, you know, but I was gonna say is it's like the fact that, you know, it was interesting transition time because, you know, John brought in like Alan Daviau and Conrad Hall. And I mean, I remember we were talking about this the other day, Maddie and I were, when Conrad Hall just came in, throws up In Cold Blood and throws up In Cold Blood and then, you know, just starts talking about it. Kiva, you say bravo, man. Bravo.
That was classic. Classic.
Dude.
That was classic.
It's always
Hey, you know what? It's the kind of colorful show we're running today, man.
yes,
It's appropriate.
This is very loose, you know. Anyway, it is something about like just like, because I was going to say the point about all that is just like the one thing that you do with a LUT, Maddie, which is interesting, is you just keep it at a you know once you set a LUT for the show, you're not tweaking it. You know, it's almost like this is our stock, let's go. And you know, whereas I've worked with other, you know, everybody has a different approach, and some other cinematographers are gonna, you know, they're gonna futz with different shots and all that kind of stuff. But we pretty much just would stick with the LUT and then use the lights or the white point of the camera to make color adjustments. You know, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just you don't want to get lost. You know what I mean? You don't want to get lost. And like James and Tom, you can speak to it when you're sitting in a DI. It's not easy when you're trying to refine the shot. You know what I mean? You don't want to refine the shot. You don't want to refine the scene. You shot it a certain way with intent. And so that's why I don't tweak it so much, because it's like, as long as that's getting translated through the workflow, then the movie should look the way the movie looks. And then we're just fine tuning it at that point. But if you're chasing it the whole time, you're going to forget what you're doing, especially when you're in a hurry on a low budget film. You're like, sometimes you're not in complete control of every single level. You're not going to remember if you were at a 2.8. You're not going to remember if you were at a 2. You're not going to remember what the light levels are or the color temperatures. The more disciplined we are, and more consistent we are, then when we go into the DI, it's mostly because I hate sitting in the DI for fucking 2 to 3 weeks. You know what I mean? I like getting in and out.
Amazing. It's funny. I actually love the DI, but that's to each their own, of course.
Yeah. Right. That's an interesting approach. Because I mean, James, in your process, and Tommy, in your process, I mean, do you just, you know, how do you handle the LUT? Do you set one for the show? What's your process on that space?
Yeah, it's interesting. So the show that Kiva and I just wrapped up is a TV series, and each episode has a different LUT, which became, which was, might have driven some people crazy, but I loved it. But yeah, I'll definitely set a LUT. I've been lucky enough to have a little prep time with my colorist the last 2 projects with Beale Street and with this last TV show, where we ended up going into the DI for just after the hair makeup test, basically, and then using that imagery to then create LUTs from, which is a really helpful tool, because I'll light the scene the way I think I'll light the show, then create LUTs that are dedicated directly for that sort of approach, lighting wise and color wise, and what the skin tones want to look like for the show, and different things like that. And I, generally speaking, don't deviate from them. I mean, I think, for example, I got in the last show 3 different versions of each LUT. I never used more than one, even for nighttime scenes, for daytime scenes, for interior scenes. I just stuck with the one each time. And like a stock, you just get to know it really well. You set your sort of ambient levels accordingly, and you set your, whatever levels you're looking at to that LUT. And that's very much how I worked. And love the idea of doing it that way. And I think you're right, Maddie. It does sort of make the DI go much smoother if you're sort of diligent about that. So yeah, I'm very similar in that regard.
What about you, Tommy?
On Snowfall, because there's a bunch of storylines that it follows. The guy John Lindley and them, they created a couple of LUTs, but then as the story expanded, I had them make different LUTs, and I switched the camera system to the Venice. But my colorist, this guy named Pankaj, is freaking great. He designed the LUTs. So I went in, did a camera test like James did, and I tweaked the LUTs to what I like at certain exposure, so then I just have my Odyssey that I actually bought from Kowalczyk. And Kowalczyk gave me the tutorial, Mike's the Matty's guy, and he totally helped me figure out how to like really read the Odyssey. So I just use an Odyssey and no DIT. And because the colors has designed the LUT, then I know the parameters of the LUT. So I have a sheet like an offensive coordinator, and Justin and I will look at it, and depending on what the storyline is, then I'm like, that's what the LUT falls in place with, depending on whose storyline that we're shooting. And then I'm like, okay, we're going to use this LUT. Okay, and from that, then I'll know where I usually set my camera at. I'll start to mess around and how the colors will shift in the bottom of the curve of it all. And because the colors design the LUT, then it will fall right in place because I'm exposing through the color dynamic of the LUT itself. So I just pop the LUT on, and I'm just exposing through there. And then when I get into the DI at Tech, it's totally fallen in place because the designer of the curve, as well as myself, have already agreed on what each file will be. You know what I mean? Like, I don't even have to sit in there that long. I usually fly through it. That's where the problem lies, is when we design a LUT, if somebody else designs the LUT and not the colorist who's doing the final color, then you're fucking chasing your tail, and it doesn't work because you have two different people, making up color lines that aren't on the same page,
Yeah.
So that's how I've done it. So I have like 6 to 8 LUTs, but it's an easy process just because it's storyline based.
How do you, I know you go to those different LUTs, like, Justin, what does that change for you guys lighting wise? I mean, just, are you talking like subtle tweaks or?
Oh, it changes base color because the color gets twisted a certain way. But if we know we're in that color space, then we know where we can kind of start from. And I even have on the chart like the color temp of the camera, and so it's like the LUT, what who's it really for, and then the color temp that I usually kind of start at 6,000, 6,500, or 2,300, and then from there Justin and I even have it color coded like a little printout, just Josh McDaniel motherfucker, and start calling out the plays.
You're going audible. You're calling audibles left and right. Yeah.
We'll yell out over the HME too. Like the actor does something like, Jay, it's an audible. Turn that shit off. Twist the color to that. And Jay, we're just going, and it works. It just, Justin, what do you say?
Well, just to piggyback off what you're saying, like a lot of this stuff with Maddox, I love working with him, is that we figured this out in the test. And then after that, he brings everybody to that session of what we just shot, to key grip, first AC. So we know everything right then and there before we even step foot on set. We're having conversations before we even start about audibles, what audibles would be, different things like that. A lot of times on set, when he changes things or when we're doing things, we really don't have a whole lot of conversation, to be quite honest with you. I mean, we can communicate through hand signals and different things like that. But he's detailed so much stuff during the test. When we get on set, I mean, he's got every LUT comes with a lighting style, examples, color temperature, tools that we plan on using, everything. When he gives us this packet, we have everything that we need. And this is just about the key grip, the ACs, or whoever studying that playbook, so that when he says, oh, this is what we're going to, we all know what instruments we're going to use, what tools we're going to use, everything. So Maddox is really down, and that's why I love working with him so much.
That's nice of Maddox, because I just yell at Kiva on the HME headset.
Well, we have that too. We have the HME too, and he definitely, like I said, he'll change it. He'll definitely change it up, but 9 times out of 10 we have it before we even start production.
You're a very nice man, Maddox.
I was just curious, like James.
I like to crack jokes on set. That's one thing I learned from my mentor down at the Filipino guy down there. It's like, you got to have fun doing this shit. Otherwise, it's not worth it, man. So you do all the work in the prep. Then, like Justin said, like Mike, we literally have hand signals for lights. So now I could switch it during the blocking or something by doing a couple of hand gestures, a different unit. I could bring in a different unit and a light level, and then we're good. I don't need to like really verbalize anything except if somebody, you know, looks crazy. You know, it's like, other than that, we're too busy cracking jokes and talking about, you know, something fucked up that somebody did. You know what I mean? Like it's that's where we got to be because the work is already done. You know.
Did James and Kiva, you guys have that kind of Jedi mind level thing going?
You know, James, you know, I'll start this if you don't mind, James.
Yeah, go for it.
I think, Mike, I was telling you, I think one of the most gratifying things on the last job we did is, you know, I'm out dialing in a large set on my meter and turn around and the camera's rolling, and I didn't even get to make it back to, you know, DIT to put the kind of final finesses on it. Everything on the meter looked good. I looked over to James or talked to him on the HME, and I'm like, "Hey, we're good." And to watch a take just go off effortlessly in a show in a very large setting, when you're collaborating with another person and something, and you're rarely, you know, sometimes you're just not even talking to them. It's an experience and an art form that I don't know exactly what else is out there that compares to that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I mean, for me, I definitely feel the same. And I think what's lovely about what Kiva and I's relationship is like is there's a history to it. You know, you guys can imagine what it's like to do a film like Moonlight with 25 days with very little money, and try to make what we made out of it takes a lot out of people. And I think both he and I have seen each other get through some difficult times. And then I think what happens after, once you come through that experience, you get to sort of have this love and respect for one another, and then and a trust. And I think that's hugely important when you talk about collaborations, talking about light, you know, color and all the things we're discussing right now. I can go talk to Barry for a while and trust that when I walk back on the set, Kiva's got it dialed in, and it's not, I don't need to be stressed out about it, even though of course I am anyway. But you know, the idea is that trust level is huge, and it's a huge component about what filmmaking is all about. And I feel that way about Kiva for sure.
Did you guys meet in grad school? How did you guys meet?
We're not very highly educated. We didn't go to grad school.
I thought you.
I'm just teasing you, Maddox. No, we met. You know, it's funny. We met years after school. We're both from the Bay Area. I think the first thing. Well, first of all, to go way back, I met Kiva when he was pushing Dolly. There's that. But then there's also the first thing we did was a short film in the Bay Area. That was probably been around 2012. So it's been a while for sure. I mean, you know, I think it just kind of takes that history to get to know someone to that level, and that trust that comes with that is just, you know, I think it's just massive. It's hugely important for me, and it just makes the whole process that much better.
Yeah, no,
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maddie, what about you guys? Were you guys always working together at AFI?
Oh, you're muted. You're muted. Oh, Maddie, you're muted.
Mike and
There we go.
Mike and I used to bitch at each other every night, talking about the other DPs who, like, cause we were some of the youngest. We were some of the youngest in the class, and we just got shit on, you know.
Yeah.
And then so like the older guys who knew more and like made sure we knew it, we used to bitch about them all the time. So you know, we came up at the same time, and Mike just blew the fuck up as a gaffer, and I trudged along in music videos, and but the most important thing is we're friends. You know what I mean? That's what makes it so easy. Yeah. We hadn't done a movie together in probably almost 10 years between Cowboys and Aliens and Birds of Prey.
Yeah.
But I honestly we didn't miss a beat. There's no bumpy bits at all. And that's just because we remained friends over the years, which is kind of amazing to me. I didn't expect to have any bumps. If anything, I thought I'm going to learn some shit from Mike because there's stuff that he knows that I don't know, and he's been working with all these other people. And like I grew as a DP. So that was kind of amazing. Birds of Prey was probably the best part of that film, was like getting back together with Mike, and it's just, you know, bringing, you know, we have all our frame of reference from stuff we had done before, but like if you look at it, if you look at Cowboys or Iron Man 1, Iron Man 2, number 23, the shit we didn't even touch those concepts. You know, we were into new shit, and we had both been staying up with technology, and we've both been. What was interesting is how similar lighting wise, or how malleable Mike is in terms of like, you know, we all do something a different way, and there's a similarity to it too, right? As DPs, but when you meet a gaffer, or just have a relationship with a gaffer, I mean, it's like you just fall in step again. It's like I brought my clarinet and he brought his saxophone, and then we just played, and it was cool.
Yeah, playing music. Yeah. No, I think what was really, and for both of us, was that when we got out of school, you know, obviously the music video world was insane, and that like period from like, you know, 93 to 97 or whatever it was, when it was just amazing amounts of money being thrown at that, but it was all being shot on film, and it was all being with technologies that were, you know, because they were like, what do you got? Oh, Xenons, this is new, no problem, let's get them. And it was just like you got exposed to so much tech, and you were doing so many days of that. It became a really excellent ground for like just, I mean, my understanding of exposure and everything, and you know, you talk about just all sorts of, you know, you show up on a job and it's like, okay, this is what it is. This is the location. Okay, let's do this, and this, and go. And so you had to really get some chops going, you know, and that was super fundamental for me. And then I also knew a lot of those things. Yeah, and so that when I started working on larger productions, I was the one who usually knew how to run the Unilux strobes or knew how to service the Xenon or something like that, because it was, you know, we had just spent years working with those technologies, which was kind of interesting. Yeah.
I can attest to that as well. This, like, watching Kiva explain how to plug in LEDs to people, and watching my frustration grow as he is teaching people how to use the stuff while we're trying to light is quite interesting, actually. So yeah, Kiva's the same way, actually.
It's funny. Did you guys have Larry Parker? You guys were at AFI. Was Larry?
No.
He wasn't at AFI, but I did meet him after that, and just kind of what his involvement was, because I know he was pretty influential for you, Justin, and kind of how that was.
Yeah, he was very, very, very influential for me. Definitely opened up. It was a place where we could just come and just learn. And like I said, you know, he would explain the character.
He was the president of Mole Richardson, right?
President, yeah, and he also taught a lot of AFI students. He would open up his facility across the street to do like demonstrations, diversity programs, just a whole bunch of things where people could do hands-on, you know, lighting experiments. And I remember going in there, and I would test, me and my buddy Sean, we would test diffusions with different lights at different lengths to see and study the quality of things. It was just a facility where he just opened it up, and you could go there and just learn how to light. He had a mock set there, so you could light the set, and he would bring different DPs in, Tom Stern, just all kinds of guys that would just come in and just light for Amy Vincent, that would just come in and light. And that's kind of how I like expedited like some of my learners, like people like that who taught me, really, you know.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to say, you know, Kiva, you sent me this image, you know, we're just talking about working relationships, and obviously you guys got a good working relationship with Barry, and this was, you had a couple images that have some stories behind them.
Yeah, this was just one of those interesting things that happens on a Barry Jenkins set, where, you know, I think this was even before any rehearsal happened, James. I don't recall exactly, but I know we were walking in a set, and Barry was like, how do we get a hard light that's, you know, we want to really feel kind of a shaft of light in here, and the ceiling is just barely above his head in height. And over the course of lunch, construction came in and ripped out the entire ceiling. And I think we rigged up something as simple as a Source 4 750 and a 50-degree barrel, and that's all we did. And it did the job. But James, do you want to talk about just a little bit about that with Barry and what it's like?
Yeah, I mean, Barry is an amazing director. First of all, I love the man. He's a very good friend of mine, and I have nothing but positive things to say about him. But yeah, he'll throw Kiva and I some last-minute curves that, are every single time fantastic ideas, but they sometimes are challenging. I mean, to get construction to come in and do that, in an hour is tricky sometimes. But they're always worth it. And I think it gets just a testament to sort of the kind of flexibility that we all have to have as filmmakers, and I guess specifically gaffers and cinematographers, to facilitate some of these ideas. And because it's a shame sometimes, and I think you meet people along your paths, and there's a sort of an adverseness to risk, or pumping the brakes on something that sounds out of the box. I think I've always had the feeling of wanting to push. I think Kiva definitely does. It sounds like we all probably share that same sort of intuition about what our work wants to sort of be. And training yourself to not say no, or even just mentally to train yourself to not even think of the negative thought. And when a director or an actor or a producer even has an idea, the instinctual point of reference for you to say, actually, let's figure this out. I feel like I've never felt like it backfired. These ideas are always, I think, strong ones.
Can I jump on that? I think with what's going on right now, all of us dealing with this whole COVID situation, I think this is a great example and possible segue to talk about how production design can really help light more of our sets, considering we may have to be stripped down in terms of crew, personnel, and time. If we can lean on more art direction and production designers to help us out, considering our cameras run from like 800 to 2500 ISO, it's like we may have to all lean more into this approach of the design is going to have more of the light than us, being ready with our, it's 8 and 8 crews, 8 electrics, 8 grips of it all. You know what I mean? I think we may have to all get into how much we can lean into them. And, with what you just said, James, as well, the idea of not saying no, I think that's another lesson I learned from Matty. I've seen Matty throwing all types of curveballs and he's fucking hitting the double like crazy. He's like, sure, no problem. And we make it happen, and it happens. And to have that attitude coming out of this COVID of it all, being able to say yes quite quickly, and then also having other departments help us light, considering we may not have the same size crew, maybe a frame of mind we all kind of have to, go with. Because, I'm hearing only 8-hour shoot days for a lot of things. And how do we still make things that are creative and placate to a really great director? And, it really comes from the energy of the yes of it all and the collaboration that we're going to need to do, I think.
Well, I think to speak.
I think you basically, the more preparation you do, Justin was saying about how you prepare for a show. Like the more preparation you have, the more inclined you are to be able to improvise at any given day. And when a director has, because you're comfortable, like comfort zone is everything. Like we feel good about what we're trying to do. We're in sync with the director. And if the director has an idea, we can consider it quickly and then come up with what has to happen to make it happen. Because these are, you're talking about a director who actually has been thinking about this longer than you, right? And it would have been nice if he mentioned it, like, couple weeks ago. But sometimes it happens that day. But when it does, you have to do it.
Requests, that shit is hilarious. Matty goes,
but that.
when you get the request and you're like, I would have liked to know that a little bit ago, but not a problem. Let's see you like perk up and like you have a whole other dialogue that goes on, but it never comes out. And then makes it happen.
Justin, go ahead. What do you got, Justin?
But you know what? To Kiva's point, I think one thing that I do when I watch movies, not just to look at the filmmaking, or the cinema behind it, but I think for me, I'm always thinking like, what may happen, what could happen, and hearing stories like Kiva just saying like, director may on the scene may want to get a shaft of light in here. Okay, I need to be prepared for that. Now that I heard that story, this is a possibility that could happen. What are the solutions to those type of things? And I think that's very important with going. I mean, you can't know everything, but I think that's very important aspect of like sitting down talking to you and how you solve problems on Munich, or how you solve problems with Maddie, how he solved problems on certain things, or Tommy, Kiva, whatever. Getting in that mindset of like, how do I solve this problem or this new suggestion? Being able to think on the fly, because once I'm hearing the director say something to Maddox, I'm already in motion. Like, I got you. I have that solution. I got you. And Maddox is like, run with it. And so I think that's very important too, is to be kind of always prepared that anything could kind of happen, anything could kind of change at any moment, and just being prepared that could happen, and having your cinematographer's back of like, I got your solution.
Yeah, and I was gonna say earlier is it's like, I think in reference to what Tommy's saying of the COVID thing and all that, is like, look, at the end of the day, good directors and cinematographers and production designers are filmmakers, and filmmakers will figure out ways to do. I mean, look, we've seen just all these images today from wildly different budget levels and different situations, and so filmmakers are going to figure out interesting ways to kind of work within whatever this is, and it's not going to work for everybody. I mean, like, some shows are going to be much more difficult than others, but there is ways to find some, there's going to be some unique approaches, and I mean that in a good way, not in a bad way. Yeah.
Well, it's going to spark innovation. We're going to find new ways to do things. And, it's our imagination. What keeps us in this game is our imagination, right? So we'll figure out a way to make films. But, we're going to need directorial help. Like, what's possible? How much do we need to move the camera? Like, but it's just going to be, but, the designer thing is going to be interesting, because they, I'm sure they're fully aware that, all the details that go into a ceiling, for example, well, those might go away, those details, because that's probably where most of the sources are going to come from to keep people out of the room, and keep stands out of the room, and keep contraband out of the room. You know what I mean? We're going to have to start getting clever with that, and it's going to be, it's going to be an ongoing thing with designers, and we're going to have to lose some things we're used to. They're going to have to lose some things they're used to, and we're going to have to meet in the middle about where we could put our units and how we like them. Because it's not always going to be a practical. We always have to augment, almost always have to augment. How are we going to augment without bringing somebody into the room? We're going to figure it out, though.
Yeah.
Hey, Mike, a friend of mine wanted to ask you a question concerning, I guess it's for the gaffers in the room. He says, what considerations do you make in terms of storytelling when lighting darker skin tones? Like, you as a gaffer, like, do you have little things that you guys have in your pocket that you use? I mean, is it just the muslin thing, or is it just like you guys as gaffers? I know that DPs, we have our ideas about stuff, but then Justin, like he said earlier, Justin's like, oh, I got you. Justin has his own idea of stuff that, he comes up with. I mean, you manufacture lights, Mike. I mean, like, is there certain things that you have in your pocket of, like, when you got Denzel in the movie right now, like?
Yeah, I mean, for me, like on this movie, this is something really interesting with Bruno. He's a huge fan of Depron, and which is this insulation material that it's like some air conditioner insulation material. I don't know exactly what it is. And so, and because we'd put muslin on the light, and he would like that, but he was like, Depron was something, and and it was really interesting because I hadn't used this much Depron. And maybe on an highlight or something, but this is like, okay, wow. And the quality of it and the way it reflected on skin tones was really fantastic.
Does it have a color shift or something in it? Is there I don't know what it is.
No, it wasn't. Oh, it's basically like, I don't know, it looks like a polystyrene, but it's very thin. And then they have different densities of it. And but what's great about it, since it has some structure, you can put it over a source and you can bend it to get some more distance, because especially with LEDs, distance is critical. So you're not seeing the LED through it and stuff. And things like that, like Depron. I mean, and it speaks to what Maddie was saying earlier, which is like, I find as a gaffer, I love working with a bunch of different cinematographers, because you just see different people's approaches and thoughts. And to what you were saying, James, is the art of conditioning yourself to not fall into the standard channels that you have, that and really understanding what's inside the head, what are they thinking, and how do we realize it? Because everyone communicates in different language, different ways. And certainly when you're starting a relationship with a cinematographer, I don't know, like how black, what do they consider black? What do they consider white? And so it's like making sure that you're able to really take a step back and put your own ego and whatever on the side and think about what are they really saying, and how do they, and how do we achieve
it's collaboration. I mean, it's funny, my very first interest in this business wasn't really storytelling, to be perfectly honest. I think the first thing I was sort of most excited about and connected with was the idea of how to collaborate. I mean, was the chaos of the set, the different departments, all these things interweaving to create this thing when the director called action. I mean, that was, when the first time I saw a set when I was a young person, that was the most exciting thing for me. And I think that it's the collaborative process that for me is paramount, and something I just love. I wouldn't be doing this without it. And so, sure, I mean, exactly, just the idea of how to collaborate and collaborative processes and how they affect the creative process is something I'm always sort of spinning my wheels about.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, we're coming up on 2 hours, which is fantastic. And thank you, everyone. I was going to make a slide of this quote, but since, of course, like everything in life, like the film business, you're always working to the last minute. So I'll just read it, which is, it's from our man, Sidney Poitier. He says, "Now more than ever, we must look to our artists to be our truth tellers and to challenge us towards creative solutions to the many problems mankind faces." So there you go.
Amen.
And, yeah.
Get to work.
That's
Get
right.
to work.
Exactly.
Yes. See you guys on set.
Yeah, exactly. So if there's anything else, I just want to say thank you so much. This was really a great conversation, and I really appreciate all your guys' views and everything. And it's look forward to seeing you on set sometime soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go for it.
Hey, I just want to give a shout out to the crew out there that's put in work on all these films that have been put in here today. All the lighting technicians, the console programmers, the LED techs, the Bay Area family, the great crew in Los Angeles that we have, and crew that was exceptional on the Underground Railroad. And we left that set in a weird state where we left it 3 days early. But the guys were amazing and really supportive of the project.
Go to Lochco.
Yeah, go to Lochco.
Lochco. Happy Bear? You had Happy Bear?
Yeah,
Happy Bear
was
Holy shit.
Hopefully get to see everybody on our sets, man. Like it's tough not to see, what you consider family members after a certain amount of time, just having fun doing this. So, thanks for putting this together. Appreciate the crews that support all the shenanigans that DPs like myself and Maddie and James. I know we run people ragged sometimes, but hopefully they walk away with a smile on their face that they were part of something quite creative. I mean, the images that we put up today, Mike, all the stuff we put up are some beautiful images. That there's a lot of people behind us that listen to us barking orders over HMEs that help make these images happen in a certain amount of time. So that life is going to change coming up in the next month or so, hopefully. And really appreciate it, and you guys have done but great work. I got a question? Hey James, did you and Kiva do Medicine for Melancholy?
Kiva wasn't born yet, so it was just me.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out of here.
Nice
No,
one.
Those are early days. That was literally like the amount of people on this call right now made that movie, and unfortunately,
good
Kiva was
movie,
not
man.
one of them.
Yeah,
Thank
anybody
you,
wants
appreciate that.
check it out. That's right up there with Maddie.
Might get back to that.
Trust me, it's a good movie. It looks great.
Thanks, I appreciate that, and thanks, Mike, for putting all this together, and everyone here. Thanks for taking the time, obviously. And this is it's nice to chat with you guys. I miss you. I miss these kind of conversations. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and this is
Chopping it up.
This is an important topic, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about this kind of stuff for a while. So thank you so much, guys, and let's be safe, and we'll see you on set.
All right,
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Take care, everybody.
Appreciate
Thank you,
it.
everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks.